My name is Jay Cormier, and I'm a communications professional in the church. I teach communications at St. Anselm's College in Manchester, New Hampshire. I also have done a lot of work in communications as a diocesan director of communications. I've worked in parish liturgy, and I've received my doctoral degree in communications and ministry at Andover Newton Theological School. Whether you're designing an advertising campaign for a major airline or fast food chain, or putting together your parish bulletin with news of your parish fair, or trying to get volunteers to teach religious ed next semester, any kind of message revolves around 7 strategies, that there are seven parts to putting together a good message and distributing that message. And I'd like to go through those 7 strategies as briefly as I can with you. The first strategy in good message design is defining the objective. What do you want the audience to do? What response are you seeking from the audience? That sounds kind of simple, but a lot of messages go wrong here, particularly in a parish setting. We make the response so complicated that the viewer of the message, the receiver of the message, just doesn't understand what's expected of them. Or we lose sight, we don't understand what we want them to do. We get so caught up in kind of the inside baseball stuff of being a church that we never make it clear what we want them to do and why. So that's the first strategy in good message sending. What do we want the audience to do? Define the objective. How do you want this audience to respond? The second strategy is to imagine the audience. Who is this audience? What are they like? What are their expectations? How involved are they? How interested are they in the message that you are sending? Some audiences are actively involved. They're actively engaged. At some point they've shown you, they've demonstrated to you that, yeah, they're on your side. They want to be part of this. They're actively engaged. Well, in that case, you can approach them with a harder sell, with more technical data, if you will, to get them to do what you want them to do. But most of the time, your audience is going to be passive or disengaged or disaffected by your message. And so the challenge becomes trying to get them involved, trying to get them to understand how important this message is to them and why their life will be better if they do what you want them to do. So imagine the audience. Who are they? How involved are they in your parish community? How invested are they in whatever program it is you're trying to get them involved in? And always remember, every good message, every effective message is centered in the audience, in the needs, in the expectations, in the experience of the audience. A good message is about the audience. It's not about the communicator. Okay, which brings us to our third strategy. And the third strategy is make a connection with the audience. In what way is your audience connected to your message? What vehicles do you have for reaching that audience? What media are they connected to? What newspapers do they read? What radio stations do they listen to? What television shows do they watch? Who are the people in the parish community who are kind of like the opinion leaders? You know, we always know those kind of folks that for some reason or other, they're the leaders in the community, and people listen to them. Who are those folks? Can you bring them on board? Can you get them to be messengers of your message, if you will, to other members of the community? Are there times and occasions in your parish where your parish community is more involved or more receptive to your message? Lent is a great time to raise the whole issue of spirituality, for example, with the parish. Ash Wednesday is a time that people are really thinking about what it means to be a member of the church, being a disciple of Christ. Are there times like that in your parish besides Lent? But always remember this. The more personal contact you can make with an individual, that's the most effective channel of communications, always. Sometimes we get carried away and we think, well, we've got a budget here for communications, so let's put the money into a big TV show or a beautiful brochure. First question you ought to always ask when trying to get a message across to someone is, can I sit down and talk to them face to face? The more personal approach you can take to your audience, the more effective your message sending will be. The fourth strategy is to articulate the big idea. What's the big idea here? What's the theme? What's the concept? What's the overarching single idea about your message? In writing class, our professors used to talk about the thesis statement. That one sentence that really says what this paper or this tome is about. Well, what's your thesis statement? What's your big idea? Currently, the Home Depot company has a wonderful big idea for their advertising. You may have heard of it. At the end of all of their commercials, the person playing the role of the Home Depot associate says, "You can do it. We can help." And I think that's a wonderful expression of a big idea. Do you have a theme like that for your message? And then use that theme in every communication, every message you send out about this particular topic. I know of one parish that after a new pastor had come into the parish, and they wanted to have some kind of a ministry fair to get people involved in the many programs of the parish, be it the choir, the lectors, but also even their support groups, their support group for widows, their parish mission program with their sister parish in Haiti, and so on. But they didn't think the phrase parish ministry fair would work. So they developed a big idea. And the big idea was the pastor and the parish leadership wanted people in the parish to consider becoming more than just a Sunday communicant, being more than just a Sunday seat filler, and become involved in at least one of these programs. Whatever program, whatever ministry, whatever group touched their lives in whatever way. And so they came up with the big idea, Sunday Plus. And they had their first Sunday Plus weekend. And in every communication, stories in the bulletin, the newsletter, when Father explained it on Sundays from the pulpit, all of those messages talked about Sunday Plus, that we are asking you to be part of our community for the Sunday Eucharist plus some other ministry. It was a great big idea. So what's your big idea? What big idea can you articulate? That one sentence. You can do it, we can help. What can Brown do for you? If you can find a better car, buy it. Those are big ideas from the advertising world. Is there a big idea for your message that you can express in that kind of thematic statement? A thematic statement that makes clear what you want your audience to do and why they should do it, why it's part of their call to be disciples of Christ. Now you're ready for the fifth strategy. The fifth strategy is actually designing the message. There are three parts to any good message. Number one, calling the audience's attention to the message. Okay. Putting the message somewhere where they're going to find it. And if at all possible, telling a story that will involve the audience in the message you're trying to tell, so that they'll understand that their participation in this message is to their benefit. That they're responding as you want them to respond is part and parcel of what it means to them to be disciples of Christ. So calling the audience's attention to the message through story, through an image, through an idea, through the big idea. Second, making the case in the next part of your message why they should respond, why it's in their best interest to respond. Sometimes in the advertising world, this is displayed as an a need that that the audience has. They have a need or a problem, and the product in question will fulfill that need. Will solve that problem, or that the product in mind will result in certain advantages and benefits to the purchaser or the consumer. Okay? In your message about your program, about your ministry, what are the needs you are trying to solve? What are the needs you're trying to fill? What problems are you trying to deal with? What advantages do you offer to those who take part in the program? That's the second part of the message, making the case why the audience should respond. And finally, inviting the audience to respond, making it clear in your message why they should respond, and how they should respond, and how easy it is for them to respond. And be clear and specific about that, how and why they should respond. Okay? So the fifth strategy is designing the message, calling attention to the message through story, through image, through the big idea, making the case why they should respond, and inviting them to respond, making it clear how they should respond. That brings us to the sixth strategy, and that's drawing up a plan for your message. You know, it's interesting that parish communities will spend a great deal of time and money putting together all kinds of programs. But they don't spend that much time or money or thought into communicating the existence of that program. That's what you need to do in the sixth step. The sixth strategy is drawing up the plan. And that deals with very practical things like, what date do we need to send the postcard out by? When does the poster have to be at the printers? On what day, and who's going to distribute the posters? If we're going to put a newspaper ad, when do we have to buy the space? When do they have to have the copy? All right. A detailed plan for every step of the message. That's the sixth strategy. And then the seventh strategy is, how'd you do? Evaluating your message. Include a system in how to measure feedback. How well did we do? Did folks respond? Did the folks we want to respond the way we wanted them to? Spend some time with that so that the next time you do a message, you'll understand what worked and what didn't. Okay? Those are the 7 strategies for sending a good message. And they work whether you're selling hamburgers or selling the gospel. Normally when I talk about crisis communications in the church, I normally start off with several examples. I don't think I have to do that. I think we've seen many examples, too many examples of the church in a crisis situation, and how the church hasn't done all that well handling it for the most part. So I'd like to spend a few minutes just talking about crisis communications. First of all, in a poorly managed crisis, there's a pattern that always emerges. Every time you read about whether it's a politician or a company or a church that finds itself in a difficult situation in terms of the public trust, there's a pattern. It usually starts within the organization that there are indications of trouble, that there's some element of the organization where things could go wrong or are going wrong. And when the leadership of the organization is made aware of that possible trouble, they tend to ignore it. They tend to play it down. They tend to just kind of put it aside. And then the crisis strikes. Then the organization finds itself on the front page of the newspaper, the lead story on the evening newscast, for some disaster or catastrophe. Now, in a poorly managed crisis, the next step usually is that the management or the leadership follows their first instinct, and that's to say nothing. They try to pretend that it will go away, and it doesn't. And the pressure begins to mount, and things get more serious. And so the leadership decides to go for the quick fix. That's when they start to stonewall. That's when they start to make light of the situation. That's when they start to blame someone. And usually it's the media. But then reality strikes. Reality hits the leadership hard, and they realize we have a problem here, and we have to deal with it. And by then it's too late. Their credibility, their authority with the public is gone, and they're playing catch-up. That's how every poorly managed crisis starts. So what are some of the strategies for dealing with a crisis? Well, first of all, the first thing to do about dealing with a crisis is to deal with it before it becomes a crisis. Taking a look at your organization, whether it's a church, whether it's a business, whether it's a school, whether it's a nonprofit organization, whatever. Take a look at your organization and try to identify the places that are most vulnerable, where things could go wrong, where something could happen that will make the organization look very bad, that will make the general public doubt your mission and your credibility to carry out that mission. So, first of all, deal with it before it becomes a problem. Anticipate the problems. Monitor those vulnerable areas of your operation where things could go wrong. Okay. Maintain effective communications with your constituencies. Okay. Develop an attitude of openness and approachability and trust with the people within your organization, and also outside your organization, through good media relationships, through good community relationships. I know of one CEO who found himself in a very difficult situation and couldn't get himself out of it. And he said, I just thought we could rely on our reservoir of goodwill. And he had been president of this organization for a very short time, and finally one of his vice presidents had to look him in the eye and say, the problem is you don't have a reservoir of goodwill with anybody. And he hadn't. He had been a prisoner of the organization, of the management team. Nobody ever saw him. Nobody knew him. He had no relationships outside of a very close management group. There was no goodwill. So dealing with a crisis situation ahead of time means building up reservoirs of goodwill, building up a sense of approachability with people inside and outside the organization, being someone that your organization, its constituencies, and those outside the organization can look to with trust. So having dared to dream your nightmares, what happens when disaster strikes? Okay, here are some strategies for dealing with that. First of all, when disaster strikes, tell the truth. And tell it fast. Do the right thing. Act out of the right, fair, just perspective. Okay? Don't try and a Band-Aid approach. Don't try to work too many sides of the street. Do the right thing for the right reasons. And then tell the truth. And tell it quick. The best thing you can do is, if disaster strikes, don't wait for the press to call. Call the press. Be ahead of the story. That's the best way that you can handle it. It's better to play offense here than play defense. And if the press calls you about this, you're now on defense. If something goes wrong, and you know it's going to go wrong, don't dare dream that it's not going to be on the front page. So go ahead and call the media. Take advantage of some of those media contacts your organization should have developed and say, we have a problem here, and this is the story. Then you're in front of the story. And then you can handle, then your credibility, your authority, your sense of ethics will never be questioned, because you came out and you spoke first. You got ahead of the story. Okay. Think the long-term consequences of what you're doing. For a short amount of time, you may have to put up with an inquiring press. There may be bad press. But be honest, be straight, think of the long-term consequences. And the long-term consequences are a loss of public confidence, a loss of public trust. And once the public no longer trusts you, you're done. You're finished. And then we have to start looking at new forms of leadership. Okay. So crisis strikes. Tell the truth. and tell the truth first. Before you get to that point, what do you do? Okay. First of all, get the facts. Make sure you understand exactly what's happened. Get the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Get that all together. Remember, different constituencies in your organization are going to deal with this differently, and they're going to have their own perspectives. And sometimes this is where the rumors start. So you, as the head of the organization, you as the person in charge, get the facts. Make sure you understand what happened and why. Next, identify the publics and the constituencies that are most affected by what happened. Are they the parents of your school children? Are they your donors? Are they people involved in a certain ministry in the parish? Who is most affected by this? And what are their expectations? What are their fears when a story like this comes out? Okay. What's the most direct vehicle, or what are the most direct vehicles for reaching those constituencies and those publics? How do you get in touch with them? How do you let them know this is what's happened, and here's how we're trying to fix it? And once you've got the facts, once you've got a handle on who the constituencies are that are most affected, then you can respond. Put together a very brief statement outlining, without any adjectives, without any blame, without any emotion, what happened. If you can say why it happened without casting blame, do that. What happened, why it happened, and here's what we're doing to fix it. And here's how our response, here's how our fix-it is part and parcel of our being a parish community. Put that together as a brief statement. And then communicate that statement to those constituencies. Put it in the form of a letter if you can. You know, it's a good idea to have somewhere in your office a stack of letters already addressed and already stamped to the various constituencies in your parish, so that within 24 hours they can receive a letter from you saying, this is what happened, this is why it happened, and here's what we're doing to fix it. And here's what you can do to help. Okay. You might also consider, besides a letter to your parishioners, a parish meeting, a parish forum. And do it as quickly as you can. Let people know we're going to meet on such and such a date at such and such a time, and we'll explain to you what happened. And be honest and be straightforward. You have your parish bulletin, you have your parish newsletter, you may have a parish website, a talk from the pulpit after Mass, at the conclusion of the liturgy, or just before it, are all ways of letting people know what happened and why. The rumors start when you delay. The rumors start when you are less than forthcoming. And that's where organizations get bogged down, and that's where they get hurt, and sometimes hurt permanently. And then after it's all over, evaluate what happened. Why did this happen? What did we miss? And evaluate your response. Did we do the right thing? Did it work? How could we have been faster on the trigger? It's also a good idea, too, to develop a game plan for this ahead of time. Identify those problem areas, like I said before, where something could go wrong in the school, in the church, in various organizations. What could go wrong? What I say to groups is, dare to dream nightmares. What nightmares could happen to us as a parish? Keep a file of news stories and clippings of various crises that have been faced like organizations like yours. Share them among your staff. And ask yourselves, what would we have done? How could this parish have handled this better? What is there about our parish that would either help or hinder our way of handling the same situation? And again, always keep at the ready a list of your constituencies so that you can communicate them by phone, by letter, by email, and let them know what's happened. The best way to handle a crisis is to handle the crisis before it becomes a crisis. That means planning, that means thinking ahead of time, that means daring to dream the things you don't want to dream about.